I am asked to speak about this idea of ego. So I put out a video yesterday stating that I am reading the book 2, the Beyond the Known trilogy, Alchemy, and it is written by Paul Selig. It is a channeled text. And as I'm reading this text, I'm, receiving messages, and I'm asked to speak today briefly about the idea of ego. So many of our trainings in what we think of as our more modern times, I would say A Course in Miracles, some of the New Age trainings, those kinds of things, speak of the shadow and the ego, the shadow being the ego, the false self or the true self. And even I myself have referenced the true self many times. And in this text, the guides state that there is no such thing as the false self. So as I'm reading that, I'm processing and I'm receiving messages. And the message is this: we come into this life and we put on a mask that we can also call our human personality or identity. For the time, let's say that is so. So I come into this life, I am born into this situation and circumstances that I'm born into as Missy. And Missy lives a life of human experiences that are based upon what the true self, the divine self, has chosen for a type of blueprint here, okay? So the Christ self has an idea of what it would like to embark upon as the personality or human identity Missy. Okay. So many of the teachings speak of the ego in such a way that they lead us to believe that the ego is something that must be overcome. It is something that must be eradicated. And though the ego can, if allowed to, and does, okay, does become a more dominant force than we think is intended. However, we have to preface that because some of the experiences we have as human beings are possible because other human beings have allowed the ego to become so prominent in their experience. Oftentimes we want to pass judgment on this. We want to say they are, and I have found myself doing that recently. I read a thing, and I read it and thought, oh, that person sounds like a real, and that person is behaving that way. I know that underneath it all is the Christ because I know that. But in this life, I can detect where that ego is kind of running amok. It's a runaway car. And And that is okay. There's no judgment. I just know from my Missy perspective, that person is not likely someone I'm going to want to spend a large amount of time with, because it's not where I'm resonating, okay? So the issue here is they're teaching in this text that we are to claim that identity as our divine self. So our divine self claims everything. Divinity claims everything, they say. And that is true. It denies nothing, because it is oneness, which is unity. It denies nothing. Nothing is outside of itself, because to deny something is to make an us and a them. To deny something is to make something unlike me. And if I do that, then I'm separating myself from God at the same time. So it's this training through the guides, because it is a training, it is teaching, it is a training program, much as is A Course in Miracles. Some potentially problematic takeaways, misunderstandings that are made from A Course in Miracles is that, again, this ego is something that needs to be eradicated. It isn't so. For some of us, and I will say it that way. For some of us, it may be so based upon our perception and purview of the world. So if I don't like the way I'm behaving on a certain day, I might say, I need to get my ego under control. That's just saying I'm choosing another way of being. It isn't necessary for the benefit of the world that all of the egos be eradicated. That is not so. Because there are those who still need to learn through struggle, through strife, through challenge. And much of that is allowed because of the prominent egos still being exercised in the world. Okay? So ideally, to say that the ego must be eradicated is to pass judgment, is to create an us and them, is to cause separation, is to participate in, predicate separation. So this teaching of the guides is higher level, not to be blasphemy, but higher level than even A Course in Miracles teaching, because we're going yet another step. Okay, let me correct that. Not higher level than A Course in Miracles. It is a higher level than what some have gleaned from the teaching of A Course in Miracles. So all of the teachings point to the same thing. But for some of us, we need more than just one to get us to the totality of understanding, remembrance or recognition of absolute truth, which is going to be hard even to reach in a human form, but we're every day we get a step closer. So this teaching is about acceptance more than I would say anything. Acceptance and the blessings that come from acceptance. I have other videos out about, I have a video out I put out about childhood trauma and the perfect purposefulness of traumatic experience. And that is because guilt and shame have been such influential forces in our earthly indoctrination. But it's true. So guilt and shame have been used steadily, consistently on the earth to guide us in a certain direction. I would say manipulate us in a certain direction. Not maybe, depending on which I am talking about. But to guide us in a certain direction. And those influences, why they're so influential is because they have also been reinforced by a lot of our religious institutions. The idea of original sin and on and on and on. So the teachings in this text are really pointing to a higher level of acceptance of everything, to the point that we accept and understand that even the ego that is out of control in another human being, allows for the environment of learning and expression, and that is what is divine. We are all the divine expression of God. Free will means we get to choose how we express. So when we see a Christ expressing as something that we would never consider to be Christ-like, right? We have to understand that is a Christ expressing as a Christ who has allowed the ego to go out of control. It's understanding, getting beyond judgment, getting beyond the us and the them, getting beyond, even to the point that we can say, oh, that's a me. That's a me who has lived that life and been influenced and by those experiences. And I am seeing it as the ego out of control. But that is exactly where I would be if I was actively participating in that life, because that is another me. That's the new understanding of oneness, is everyone we encounter is another version of us. And we can't, it's hard to judge them once you realize, it's hard to make them bad or wrong once you realize that this is another version of me. The only difference is the life that they have lived and multiple influences within that and others, okay? And this is where they are today. But that is me living that life, having those influences with that lens that has been formed through that, okay? So when we get to that point, oneness takes on a whole new level of understanding. And when you see someone who is acting a way that you think is repulsive. Remember that. Remember that. But it also means that in the personal life, in my personal life, you know, I said to my husband yesterday, I said, I don't know what's going on with you. I don't know what's wrong, but I really can't stand being around you right now. Okay? And he looked at me and he laughed and he said, I don't know what's going on with you. You're grumpy and I can't stand to be around you right now. And we both laughed because, you know, once you get to that place, you can say to your brother, to your lover, to your whoever, I really can't stand being in your presence right now. And you can mean it with everything in you, but at the same time, you don't take offense when they give it back to you because you know that, you get it. It's not a me versus you. It's a here's where we are. And there's no offense anymore. So I'm just putting this out there because, again, the message that came through regarding oneness and it's not even an integration, and that was something else that was told to me. It's not even, we don't have to integrate the ego. It's not an integration because to integrate the ego is to imply that it is separate from us. Even to say we have to assimilate it, to assimilate it, is that it is separate from us, right? So we don't need to integrate it. It is already there. There's nothing for us to do with it except to accept. Through acceptance, through pure, perfect acceptance, we are aware of whether or not we want to choose to act in a different way or choose not to allow those just one second. Those for the word aspects, because it's part of us, those aspects to take control of the situation or to lead, right? And that's all it is. It's what aspect of me do I want leading the moment? And who do I want following? Because it is all part of us. The level of acceptance to say, yes, that is part of me as Missy in this human experience. That is part of me as the divine having this experience. So I hope this message finds you well, and peace and love. May you be blessed.